Welcome to this tutorial on the technical aspects of coding. What I'm going to show you is all the various ways of coding and other things you need to know when you code, like deleting a code, renaming a code, changing the length of a coded segment, getting rid of a coded segment, and so on. I'm only going to work with test codes, so I use the labels test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4. I'm not going to code any meaningful segments. It's not about the method or the methodological aspects of coding, simply about the mouse clicks. So let's get started. I mark an arbitrary segment here, and I click right on the highlighted segment and choose the option coding, open coding. You may know the term open coding if you read books on grounded theory, but in Atlas it only means creating a new code, nothing more than that. So if I click on it, I get a field to enter a code label, so I enter test 1 and click on the enter key. And now 4 things have happened on my screen, 4 changes. I see a first entry in the quotation manager, a first entry in the code manager, and I see the visual equivalent here in the margin area. So this is a visual entry for code. And so we see the bitmap here and the name, and the bar here is a visual equivalent for the quotation. So we actually have created 2 objects. That means we can also comment on each of the 2 objects. So we can comment on each quotation, we can comment on each code. We can use them as single objects in network views. We can link them to each other. These are the links between quotations are called hyperlinks. I briefly say something about the naming convention here. We get an ID, and that is the first number is the number of the document. So we are in P4 now, so the quotation starts with a 4, and then 1 is the first quotation we have created in primary document 4, and it starts in paragraph 1 and it ends in paragraph 1. Atlas does count paragraphs. You don't get a count for line numbers, and that is related to the flexibility of the width of the document in a digital environment. See, if I make it wider, we have only 4 lines. If I make it smaller, we get 8 lines. So if Atlas would count line numbers, that would not remain constant, and that would change all the time, and you won't get a proper reference. Knowing that should feed back when you transcribe data. So even if somebody goes on and on and on, talking for a long time, break that speaker unit into paragraphs. Otherwise you get a reference to a very long unit. So keep that in mind in case you have data that you need to transcribe. Now I can make it a bit wider again. The quotations, let's return to the number here, are numbered in terms of time when you have created them. The next one will be 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and so on, no matter where the location is. If I create, let's do it now, I've created a quotation now higher than what I've coded before. Now I enter test 2. This is going to be quotation 4.2, but it's in paragraph 20. So you see, you get the position here at the end of the quotation name, and these IDs are chronological. That is related to the fact that often you don't code from the first line to the last line in your document, or maybe at first, but then you go back and you recode and you rename, and so then the question is, when should Atlas recalculate all these numbers? Every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every time you start the software? So that's why you have a chronological count. The nice thing about that is that it's not going to change. Yeah, that the fifth quotation in your document, well, that remains the fifth quotation. Even if you delete the fourth one, the numbers don't shift automatically. If you need them sequential, under miscellaneous, you have an option to order them according to doc flow, or you can also get rid of the empty numbering in between by squeezing the quotation. You find these options under miscellaneous. In case you wonder if you clicked along, this is the single column view I'm seeing now here. So if I click on view, it's a single column view, so we get the ID, we get the first 30 characters of the quotation if it's a text quotation, and then we get the paragraph numbering at the end. So for codes, we get two numbers. Again, this is a single column view. The standard view is the detailed view. But for coding, actually, this is quite all what you need to know. The frequency and the so-called density. The density is the linkages of codes to other codes. So the first one is the times, how many times you have used the code for coding, so the frequency, and the density remains 0 until you begin to link codes and to create network views. So at the beginning of your coding, the second number probably remains 0 for a longer time, and it's not going to automatically increase density. That's something the user is going to do, linking codes based on the interpretation and what you found in the data. So I hope this is, what I did here is open the code manager by clicking here on the button codes. So this view I just created, this is how your screen should look like, that you have your document here, about 1/3 of the screen, that you see your codes here and the code manager next to it. We will shortly use the code manager for coding, and it's basically the easiest way of coding in addition to the open coding option we used so far. I use the coding option, the open one. Again, now I do overlap some codes. Do enter my test 3 code. And now we get some colors. So the first color is silver, and the second one is gray. You could also refer them to as gray and brown. I rather like silver and gold. And that is to indicate which code belongs to which quotation boundary. So test 3 belongs to that golden bar here, test 1 to the silver one, test 2 also to the silver bar. So once it gets crowded in the margin area, then these colors are quite helpful to see which code belongs where. Well, if you on screen, well, you can click on it, and then of course the segment is highlighted, so these codes are interactive. You can use open coding. You can also create a code here in the code manager, because we have it already open. So if you click on this icon, we had that before, that's always for creating a new object. I can enter a code name, so I enter test 4. And now I can use test 4 for coding. So you see it's not used yet. I just entered a new code here, so it's 0 frequency, 0 density. So the easiest way of coding basically is via drag and drop. Well, I mark a segment on purpose a bit lower on my screen. So I take my code now, move it, and you see I can't drop it here. It's a stop sign. As soon as I'm over the window splitter, you see the mouse is changing. I can drop it. There's no need to drop it here onto the highlighted segment. Now I can do so, of course, but I can just drop it anywhere. So whatever it's highlighted gets coded if you work with text. With PDF files, you do have to hit on the highlighted area. But if you code text, just highlight something, take the code, drop it on the other side. That helps you, or helps your eyes and helps your wrists, basically. If you have smaller segments, kind of hitting the highlighted area is tiring on your eyes, and coding always the highlighted segment also gets trying for your wrist. Yeah, so if you move it like that and move it like that and one, yeah, sometimes keep it straight. If you code for long stretches of time, then that might be a problem for your wrists. So just take the code, drag it over, keep your wrist straight and drop it. There's also another option. You can try what you prefer here. That's this button in the code manager. Maybe also quite useful if you use multiple codes. Yeah, you can also highlight more than one code. I hold down the Control key to highlight these two codes, and then I just click here on the button in the code manager. And now this segment is coded with two codes. So whatever option you find easier for you to use. I mentioned before that codes in the margin area are interactive. So if I don't want the test 1, the test 4 here, for example, because it would be redundant, then I right click on the code and say unlink. Now the code is gone again. It's unlinked to that quotation. If I don't want that coded segment at all, I don't click on the code, I click on the coded segment. So I can click and either write on the boundary or on this bar here, or I click right on this, on the highlighted area, which is a bit easier to hit. So here I can click delete. This doesn't delete the text, it only deletes the quotation. So think about your data being somewhere on your hard disk, then the HU as a layer on top, and then the quotation and the codes. So if you delete something from this layer, it doesn't really affect the data on your hard disk. So if I delete a quotation here, well, that doesn't affect my text. So I will be asked to confirm. I click on OK, and now that coded segment is not coded any longer. So what else might I need to do? I might need to extend the length of a quotation or make it shorter. Increasing the length is one mouse click less than minimizing it. So if I want to extend this quotation to the entire paragraph, well, I just highlight the entire paragraph and click on the Modify button. Note that we have a button here for creating a quotation and one for modifying. That's the one with the red line. So if I click on that button here, the quotation length increases. So if I want to make it smaller, well, I can't just mark something in here. You see it's the stop sign here. I can't make something smaller using a larger selection. So what I need to do is either to click here or here, so above or below the segment, to get rid of the highlighted area. Then I select something smaller here and click on my Modify button again. And you see now it has been reduced. So let's turn to the code manager. What else can you do here? Well, you can delete a code if you don't want one. So you have the delete option here, or the button here as well in the toolbar. You can also merge codes. Well, I show you the merging after I've entered a definition for the code, so you can see that leaves an audit trail if I merge codes that are already defined. So the common field here for codes is for writing a code definition. And let's write one for that one. Codes. So you see, as soon as I click on another code, the definition is saved and we get the tilde sign. So all objects that are commented, that doesn't not only apply here to the codes in the code manager, so it's true for all objects in Atlas, they get a tilde sign. and then I can immediately see that something is defined here. Defining codes is something very important from a methodological point of view. Well, this is about technical aspects, but as we talk about writing comments, I'll mention it here. I often see projects where just one person works on the project that where no codes are defined, because those people think, well, I know what I mean with my codes. Team projects, well, the codes are always defined because you have to communicate to your team members what do you mean with the code. You also have to communicate that with yourself if you work on your own, because the meaning of a code changes over time. You may think something about a code in the first 2 hours of an analysis, but 3 months later your thoughts have developed, hopefully, and you got some more insight into the data, and the first code label may not be covering the meaning that it actually has now. So sit down, and at some point, if you finished with this first stage coding and you get a first structure into your code list, then sit down, take the time and go through and define your codes. You will see how useful it's going to be. You will find codes that have 2 labels but they actually have the same meaning, so you can merge them. So what we're going to do next. You'll find probably also codes where you can't remember what you thought about them. You have to click through the quotations and remind yourself. And it will be a very important process also in advancing your thinking about your analysis. So a lot of times if I send people say, let go and define your codes, they come back and say, well, that was a very good exercise and it helped me a lot. And there were lots of things that weren't quite straight and not clear cut, and it was very important to go through and define the codes. And if you write a thesis, well, you have to probably attach a code book anyway, so you can create a code book based on the codes and definition you write here via the XML output option. So don't do it at the end of your thesis when you prepare your material. Just do yourself a favor and do it early on in the analysis. So if I merge these codes now, I merge test 3 now with test 1. I click on right click. I have the option merge codes and use test 1 and say OK. Atlas informs me that they merged the 2 codes, and you see that we get an audit trail that we have merged test 3 with code 2 or code test 2. If you wonder about my font, I increased it on purpose, so normally it is not that large, so your audit trail will be written in a smaller font, or well, depending on your settings. You find the font settings under extras, preferences, general preferences. Or what sometimes also is quite useful if to move codes around here. Let me code this one with test 4 again. And now if I want to actually also code that one with test 4, I hold down the control key and can move the code and just attach it to the bar. Or if I say, well, that wasn't, this was not right here to code test 4 here with that segment, actually I wanted to attach it here. I don't hold down the control key, then it's disconnected here and linked to this quotation. So that's also some activity you can do here in the margin area. But I haven't shown the renaming. Where's the option? Rename. So rename for code, which you probably also need quite often. And the other important thing is how to exchange codes. That's quite useful if you develop subcategories, or if you took a code by mistake and then I want to exchange it. So let's exchange that test 3 code with test 2. Now I have to hit it, wire drag and drop, and as soon as I drop it onto another code, you see the mouse pointer is changing, you can drop it, and I've exchanged it. And let's exchange now the top one here with test 3. So these are the colors defined by ATLAS.ti based on the quotation boundaries and how they are positioned actually in the margin area. You can of course also create your own user-defined colors by clicking on this colored circle, make them right here, and I make that one green. So now the colors don't appear yet in the margin area. If you want to see your own personalized colors here, click right in the margin area and use the option Use Object Colors. So now you see your personal, or the colors I set for my codes show up here in the margin area, and I do get little small tiny bars in front of the code name. So these are the this way you can figure out which code belongs to which quotation bar. So these tiny ones, they get the same color as the quotation bar. So that's quite useful if you work off screen, if you get a printout, for example, of your of what you see actually here on the screen, and also if you have quite dense coding, it's also quite useful to just get an idea of what it belongs to, even though you can click on it, of course, and then it's going to be highlighted. The last thing I'm going to show you, which often is asked about, is also how do I get out my coded segment on paper, because I want to discuss it in the team, I want to discuss it with my colleagues, I want to show it to my supervisor. And the options to do so you find under the Documents menu. So what we want to do is to print out the coded document. So that's a hint that we want to need the main menu Documents, and it's under Output, and this right area on the side is called Margin, so that's why the option is called Print with Margin. If I click on it now, the screen changes to show me what I see on the output. Yeah, so you see that gray area here on the side. So if I have code names that are longer, or if I have some dense coding, then that may actually fall off the page. So what you probably want to do is to set your page to landscape. Yeah, you do that under Printer Setup. That's landscape in English. And now you see I have some more space on my screen. Also the layout looks a bit nicer. So you can kind of set the width of the document and yeah, in dependence on the number of codes you have and the length of the code labels, so it all fits on a page. So you see up front, so you don't have to print it and then see what the outcome is. So I go to Print with Margin again, it pops up my printer dialog, and I don't want to print it out, I want to print it as PDF document. So I go to my PDF creator. Enter a name or take the default, and I save it now to the desktop. So here now we have the result of the PDF output. Here we see the coded part as we have seen it on the screen, and in addition we get the paragraph numbering. So you can use this also for reasons of transparency as attachment, also in digital form to your thesis. So if you give a reference to a certain quote, you can use the paragraph reference numbering that we have seen in the quotation numbers. So that's always also what you get in the output, the ID, what we had before, quotation 1 in paragraph 21. And in the output then, well, we have changed it by now, there's no test 1 anymore, but so if that would be a reference to code test 2 in paragraph 1 document 4, you will be able to find it here in the output. So far the tutorial on the technical aspects of coding. Have fun.